There's this bizarre cognitive bias where if someone is smart or talented in one area, they automatically assume that they'll dominate everything else. You crush med school? Then you'll obviously nail investing. After all, personal finance should be a breeze after a decade of medical training. Wrong. Being highly competent or a genius or super talented in one area of your life has pretty much no correlation with being smart about money. You're just as clueless about money as anyone else until you invest in learning how to manage and optimize your finances. Now, I'm going to break down the 10 money mistakes that even smart people make over and over again, especially doctors. Miss these, and you're going to spend the next decade wondering how, as a doctor, you're making mid six figures, yet you're still struggling financially. All right, let's kick things off with a big one. This is a mistake I've seen countless times, and it's undervaluing your own growth while chasing status symbols. We hesitate to invest in ourselves, but then quickly drop cash on things that are purely superficial. I've seen aspiring entrepreneurs buy the newest, most expensive laptop before they've even landed their first client or proven their business model. And meanwhile, they skimp on taking an online course that could teach them key marketing skills. A lot of medical residents also fall into this trap. So look at it this way. Every dollar you sink into lifestyle inflation during residency is a dollar you're not using to pay down your student loans, invest, or build real freedom. So prioritize investments that improve your skills, knowledge, or effectiveness. Trust me, you don't need that fancy car just yet. In fact, I talk all about my own expensive car and why expensive cars are a trap on my car channel, which you can find right up here and linked below. Another big money mistake is the all or nothing approach to saving. So on the one hand, you've got the obsessive savers who hoard every penny and never spend on anything that could improve their situation. They'll drive a car held together with duct tape and eat cup of noodle for months, but they won't spend $2,000 on a certification that could boost their salary by $20,000. These people have $50,000 sitting in a savings account earning 0.1% interest because they're terrified of risky investments, even though inflation is eating away at their purchasing power every single year. On the other hand, you've got people who think every purchase is an investment in themselves. They'll blow money on expensive courses, coaching, and gear while having zero emergency funds. One unexpected car repair, and they're putting it on a credit card at 22% interest. Now, both approaches are disasters waiting to happen. And here's what actually works. You need a safety net, and you need to invest in your own growth. Build that emergency fund first, and once you have that foundation, don't let fear stop you from making strategic investments in your earning potential. The key is having both protection and growth, not choosing one extreme or the other. As with most things in life, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Now, I see this all the time with pre-meds and med students. They skimp on resources that would ensure they get into medical school or a top residency, but they don't realize the risk and financial cost of a failed or suboptimal application. Investing in quality MCAT prep, USMLE tutoring, and getting highly seasoned professional eyes on your medical school or residency application from those who have served on admissions committees is an investment that has a high expected return, meaning the expected benefits and improvement in your odds of success far outweigh the monetary cost of doing so. If you're a pre-med or medical student, check out medschoolinsiders.com or click the link in the description to learn more. The next mistake is ignoring your own progress. A lot of people have no clue where their money goes. They're flying blind, hoping things work out while their money slowly bleeds away through 1,000 tiny cuts. But you can't manage what you don't measure. So to gain better control and insight into your finances, you need to track your money. What gets measured gets managed. And I learned this back in 2016 when I started using Personal Capital. At least that's what it was called before they rebranded it to Empower. I was in the classic med student situation. I had student loans, I was in debt, and my net worth was negative. But tracking it changed everything. Even seeing the negative number was motivating because I could watch it slowly climb towards zero and then beyond zero. And now there are different ways you can do this. You could create your own Google spreadsheet or use one of the many finance apps that are out there. But spreadsheets require way too much manual tracking. You'll update it 1 week and then you'll totally forget about it for the next several. And the issue with a lot of other finance apps is that they're really focused on budgeting, which works for some people, but I don't think it's as important as having a dashboard that shows you everything. And that's why I've been using Empower. So when I log in, I can view my cash savings, my credit card balances, and my investment performance, including asset allocation, all in one place. And if you have a home, you can even track your home value using Zillow's estimate and also your mortgage balance. The thing I find incredibly valuable is that every day I get an email with all my transactions straight to my inbox. It takes me maybe 30 seconds to scan when I'm drinking my tea in the morning, And I've actually caught several fraudulent charges and random bank fees thanks to this daily habit. Once your net worth hits $100,000 across cash, checking, investments, and retirement, you can schedule a free video call with an Empower financial advisor. They'll create a personalized plan based on your goals. No pressure, just a second opinion. Now, I've been using Empower since 2016, way before they agreed to partner on this video, simply because it's the best tool that I found for staying on top of my finances. And guess what? It's totally free. I've been using them for almost 10 years now, and I haven't been charged even a cent. Check it out using my link down in the description. The next money mistake is mismanaging your financial flow. Now, most of us fall into one of two predictable traps. Either you're overly frugal or you're excessively wasteful. And the real game is figuring out which side you lean toward and then trying to work your way towards the middle, find that balance point. Now, my upbringing conditioned me to always opt for the cheapest option and minimize spending whenever possible. But as I started building my business, another voice was growing louder, telling me that sometimes I needed to invest in myself and my future in order to grow. This was actually another version of mistake number 2. I was focusing on my emergency fund and saving, but not enough on growth. So for years, I ignored that second voice. I continued using my ancient, underpowered MacBook Air, which sucked for video editing. And even though I was closing in on 1 million subscribers on YouTube, I was still using budget starter lighting for my YouTube channel, literally $60 for 2 softboxes. And then I remember stumbling across this much smaller YouTube channel, maybe it was like 18,000 subscribers, and they were using all this expensive equipment that I was telling myself I didn't need, but they had really high production quality, better than mine. And that moment completely changed my perspective. Here I am, sitting at 800,000 subscribers, using garbage, low-level starter equipment, while someone with 2% of my audience size is making a smarter investment in their setup and is hopefully going to accelerate their growth. And that's when I finally realized how silly I was being. Why wasn't I willing to invest in my own business? But I've also seen plenty of people with the exact opposite problem. You see that paycheck hit your account, and it immediately starts flowing back out on a dozen different purchases before you even realize what happened. And I've watched this play out with my girlfriend, who's naturally more of a spender. Money doesn't stick around too long in her accounts, not because she's buying anything crazy, but because spending feels natural and painless when you see that balance sitting there. So the solution for overspenders is completely different to what I needed as an underspender. So with my girlfriend, we actually removed the temptation entirely by making her money disappear before she could even see it. We set up her company retirement account such that 15% of every paycheck automatically gets deposited into her 401k before it even reaches her checking account. No willpower required, and there's no temptation to spend it because it was never really there in the first place. Mistake number 5 is not knowing what your time is worth. Most people are taught not to waste money on frivolous tasks that they can do themselves. But once you're making a livable wage, it makes mathematical sense to buy back your time and reduce friction in your everyday activities. So when I was doing my away rotations as a 4th-year medical student in plastic surgery, I didn't have a car, I just had a bicycle. I would bike to the grocery store, load up on groceries, and bike back home. It was incredibly time consuming, and trying to balance groceries on a bike, it's way harder than I realized. So I knew I had to come up with a different plan. I was already doing 80, 90, oftentimes more than 100 hours per week at these away rotations because in surgery, they want to push you and see what you're made of, see if they can break you. And luckily, Instacart was just launching back then, offering all these promotional deals. Because I was a broke med student in debt, I kept signing up for new accounts every 2 weeks to take advantage of these free delivery promotions, since saving the extra $10 or $15 per grocery delivery was super meaningful. I was broke. Now, these sorts of tricks, they're helpful in college and even medical school, especially when you don't have a car. But looking back, I should have just accepted the grocery delivery fees once I was in residency, had a car, and was making a livable wage. Because by the time I hit residency, I was routinely working 12 to 14-hour days, sometimes pushing 19, and occasionally doing overnight calls, staying there for 36 hours straight. And on top of that, I was running a YouTube channel and building a separate business on the side. And there were stretches where I worked 20 days without a single day off. And when a day off finally came around, it was more like a catch-up day. It was a spree focusing on groceries and laundry and errands and bills and everything that had piled up in the last couple weeks. And back then, any time away from the hospital or for the operating room went towards my businesses like Med School Insiders. So the day off wasn't downtime, it was more like survival mode, catch-up. And you're squeezing life into these few hours that you can find. So that experience completely changed how I think about time. So let's say you make $50,000 a year. your time is going to be worth about $25 per hour. So spending 3 hours cleaning your own apartment effectively, it's about a $75 cost. And you might say, well, I wasn't going to be working during those hours anyway, so I wasn't going to make $75. True, but that's not the point. You could have, and you need to anchor your hourly rate at some number. And if you're not working, you could have been resting, recharging, or just doing something that you enjoy. This is a very helpful framework for figuring out which items or tasks you should spend money on to save time and whether or not it's worth it. So here's the mentality that I recommend. Only do tasks that either make you money or bring you joy. Everything else in the middle, like the chores that you despise, is a prime candidate for outsourcing. And you don't need to be rolling in the dough to think this way. You only need to start valuing your time appropriately. So outsource or delegate getting your car washed, getting your groceries delivered, and getting your apartment cleaned. The next mistake is believing you make all of your financial decisions based on your own values and logic. But your spending habits are highly emotional and are heavily influenced by the people you're around most. If you consistently spend time with people who are always broke, they're complaining about money, they justify every purchase with YOLO, then you'll start normalizing those behaviors without even realizing it. But if your friends think strategically about their financial future, then you'll naturally start moving in that direction too. Now, this isn't a character flaw, it's just how humans work. We've evolved to mirror our tribe because fitting in used to be a matter of life and death. Now, most people think that they're immune to this influence, but if you can't clearly explain how you developed your current beliefs about money, chances are you pick them up from someone else. And once you realize how much your financial habits are shaped by your social circle, you can start being more intentional. Friendships are naturally going to evolve over time. You grow closer to some people and you drift away from others. Now, this doesn't mean you need to be ruthless or dramatically cut people out of your life. But if someone's financial habits are consistently dragging you down, they're a negative influence, then it's okay. Let that relationship naturally fade, even if you've known them for years. Mistake number 7 is upgrading too fast, too soon. Most people think that once they can afford something better, they should immediately get it. You land a new job, so obviously you need a new car to match. You get a bigger paycheck, so naturally you should just get that bigger apartment. But this creates a vicious cycle that's extremely difficult to break. What happens is something called hedonic adaptation. Basically, you get used to that shiny new upgrade incredibly fast, and it becomes your new baseline, your new normal. And even worse, this leads to the hedonic treadmill. So once that initial dopamine hit wears off, we crave the next upgrade. We want bigger, faster, fancier. Now, I actually wrestled with this back when I owned a 9-year-old Scion FRS, had a market value of like $8,000 to $10,000. And meanwhile, I was eyeing a sports car that cost 10 times more, $100,000. I mean, this was a beast with more power, more speed, more prestige. Cayman GT4, love the car. But by the way, after driving many GT4s, I no longer love them, but I explained that more on the Jabal and Cars channel. Now, a big part of me felt like I deserved the upgrade. I was doing well financially, and I love taking my car to the racetrack, and this car is designed for the racetrack. But that's exactly why I paused. Because when you take the car to the racetrack, you have to think about consumables, like brake pads, tires, oil. They wear out faster, and with higher end cars, those consumables are also significantly more expensive. And also, if it's an expensive car, you go to the racetrack, your insurance doesn't cover it. So you either need to eat the cost yourself if there is damage to your car, or you buy track insurance. And a more expensive car has way more expensive track insurance. So the true cost wasn't just the price tag of the vehicle, it was the overall ongoing burn rate. So instead of making that giant leap, I actually chose to follow a philosophy that I call the intentional stepwise progression. So instead of jumping from low to high, take lots of smaller steps from low to medium, and so on. And that way, you actually get to enjoy each upgrade and you extend the number of dopamine spikes that you enjoy. Just because you can afford the upgrade doesn't mean that you should. So let your ego sit in the back seat and take control of the wheel. Here's another mistake ambitious people make. Optimizing so hard for tomorrow that they completely miss today. And I get it. When you're grinding through medical school or building a career, it feels irresponsible to spend money on anything that is not directly advancing your goals. So every dollar should go towards debt, savings, and investments, right? But some opportunities don't wait for you to be financially ready. So it's very common at the end of your 4th year of medical school, you have a couple months off before residency. And it's very common for people to travel. So a bunch of my friends were planning this big trip to Southeast Asia to celebrate graduation. And many of them came from more privileged backgrounds. And I remember thinking, dude, this sounds dope. I'd love to join, but there's no way in hell that I can swing 6 months traveling abroad. But still, I realized something. I would never get another chance to travel internationally with this group of friends at this stage of life. After this, it's residency, adulthood. No one's gonna have the same time off, all synced up. So instead of writing it off completely, I made it work on my terms. I went to Bali for 2 weeks instead of 2 months. I traveled with a single backpack, stayed in hostels and budget Airbnbs, and kept my expenses very low. It was simple, affordable, and one of the most memorable trips of my life. Your 20s and early 30s, they come with this rare mix of energy and flexibility and freedom. Don't defer every meaningful experience for some mythical future when you'll have enough money and enough time. The next mistake, most people don't understand the cost of playing it safe. They avoid any financial risk, stick with conventional paths, and keep their money in savings accounts because it feels secure. But every safe decision has a hidden cost: the opportunities that you're giving up. Now, I learned this when I was facing one of, if not the biggest decision of my life: whether or not to leave plastic surgery to focus on building my businesses. And on paper, staying in residency looked like the obvious risk-free choice. Many people are going to disagree with what I'm about to say because of the bias of rosy retrospection, where you look back and things didn't seem so bad back then. That's why med students look back at their pre-med years, oh yeah, that was easy. Residents look back at their med school years, oh yeah, that was easy, it wasn't so bad. But the fact is that when I was in plastic surgery residency, the hardest part of my medical training was already behind me. The hardest part was grinding to ace the MCAT, get into a top med school while I was battling inflammatory bowel disease that wasn't well controlled at the time, pushing relentlessly to earn a top USMLE score for both step 1 and step 2, and then honoring rotations and cranking out research to match into a hyper-competitive specialty because plastics was the #1 most competitive specialty at the time. By the way, official stats are released every 2 years, and we update the list of which specialties are more or less competitive. Plastics is now number 4, and you can check out specialtypredictor.com if you want to see where your odds stack up and if you are able to match into these various specialties based on official data. So again, I was already in residency, and the hardest part was behind me. I just had to show up, do the work, and I would come out the other side as a board-certified plastic surgeon. No more nonsense to brown-nose your seniors on away rotations, no more 2 to 3 month intense sprints studying for standardized tests, since USMLE Step 3, which is what you take in residency, doesn't really matter much. All you have to do at this point is endure the long hours in the hospital month after month for 6 years. It's not easy, but it's not the hardest part. And that's where the illusion of safety creeps in. Because what we don't often consider is the opportunity cost. And it is a real cost, it is a real risk. So on top of the 80-hour weeks from residency, my business was growing fast and it was demanding even more of my time. Every month that I stayed in training was a month I wasn't scaling something with massive potential. And eventually I made the call to leave. And yes, it felt very risky at the time and people thought I was crazy, but that calculated risk paid off in ways that the conventional route just couldn't have. This applies to smaller decisions too, though. People keep money in savings accounts because investing feels risky, not realizing that inflation will erode their purchasing power. Or they stay in jobs that they've outgrown because the paycheck feels secure. Now they're missing opportunities to dramatically increase their earning potential because they can go find another job that pays them way more. They're more valuable than that. And the reality is that not taking calculated risks is often the biggest risk of all. You're not protecting what you have. You're sacrificing what you could have built. So before making any major financial decision, ask yourself, what am I giving up by choosing the safe option? The final mistake is thinking that you can handle every aspect of your finances on your own without taking the time to become financially literate. And look, I get the DIY mentality. You're smart, you're capable, and you figured out complex things before. So why would you need help with your money when you can just learn it yourself? I had this exact mindset for years. I was trying to optimize everything myself, taxes, investments, insurance decisions, because I didn't want to admit that I was out of my depth. But the turning point came when I started following resources like the White Coat Investor during medical school. I realized that people who had actually been through these financial challenges had already figured out the optimal strategies. So instead of reinventing the wheel, I could learn from their experiences and avoid their mistakes. And that's when I understood the difference between being cheap and being smart. Being cheap meant trying to do everything myself and avoid any costs. Being smart meant recognizing when I needed guidance and finding the right resources to learn from. And you don't need to wait for a high income to start learning the stuff. Even if you're in school or earning minimum wage, the habits and knowledge you build now will compound over time. And when you do start finally making more, you'll already know how to handle it. If you find yourself wasting time second-guessing financial decisions or constantly putting them off, there's a sign that it's time to get serious about your financial literacy. And you don't need to hire a pro. Sometimes it's just the right book, the right video, or the right mentor is all that it takes to completely transform your trajectory. We go deeper into this inside The Unhappy Doctor Solution, my new course designed to help you take back control of your career and your life. For those looking to get their finances in order, we're including a dedicated mini course on physician finance. Click the link down below to join the waitlist. You'll be the first to know when it launches. And don't miss out on this video right up here on how to do credit card churning correctly. It's how I traveled for free even during medical school.